this day in Black baseball history. Today we're going to start in on October 13th. Of course, today is October 13, 2025. So we're going to look at some historical events that occurred on August 13th throughout history. I think we're going to go back to 1900, start there. And we're going to talk about some things that I think you might find quite interesting and some people that need to be talked about more. And some people whose names, some of these players whose names just keep reoccurring, especially in the exhibition season when they're playing against National American League teams. So we're going to jump right in here. I'll wait till 1 minute to give people a couple chances to get in here, and then we'll just jump on in. Occasionally we'll get a few trolls out here when I come in live, but I always tell people if they don't have anything better to do except troll me, I feel sorry for them. So, but if they're here, hey, they're going to learn something while they're here. So let's leave it at that. Okay, so you ready, guys? We're going to jump in here. Okay, now remember, if my name is Phil S. Dixon. If you like what I'm doing here, you can follow me on Twitter. You can follow me on Facebook. I have a page, the Negro League, that actually is called NLBalive.com. Stands for Negro League Baseball Alive.com. So we're trying to pick up everything and do a lot of unique things with all of these particular social medias, okay? All right, then, so let's jump right in here. And October 13, 1900, Bert Wakefield, born 1870 in Troy, Kansas, playing as the Chicago Union Giants first baseman, hit a solo home run in the ninth inning to defeat the Chicago Columbia Giants in a 3-2 final before a crowd of 1,200 at Chicago's West Side Park, which West Side Park at that time was the National League Park. And Cannonball Miller received credit for the win when he struck out 10 and allowed 7 hits. Let me get a drink right quick. All right, lots to unpack there. Now, Bert Wakefield, pretty good player. First time I came across his name was years ago. I picked up a photograph of the 1908 Kansas City Monarchs. He was on that picture. And I originally got the photograph from a guy named Neil, Neil, what is his name? Pullum was in Chick Pullum. He was the catcher on the Monarchs, and his son was living in Kansas City, Missouri, and he provided me with the photograph, and I was able to save that photograph for all time. And that was Chick Pullum. Chick Pullum later on became a member of the Kansas City Monarchs Booster Club. But back around the turn of the century, Chick Pullum was playing around Kansas City with the original Kansas City Monarchs. Now, this isn't J.L. Wilkinson's Kansas City Monarchs. This was the original Kansas City Monarchs. They had people like Bill Lindsay was on there. His brother Frog Lindsay was on there. Bert Wakefield was one of the players. They had a pretty good roster of good talent. Now, Troy, Kansas. Okay, Troy, Kansas. Now, I come from Kansas, and so places like Troy are not too far from me. I grew up in Kansas City, Kansas, so Troy, Kansas is about 64 miles from where I was. Now, if you know the state a little bit, I'm with the Kansas Humanities, so I travel in these areas quite a bit. It's probably about 71 miles from Topeka, Kansas, and 19 miles from Atchison, Kansas. Now, what's interesting, if you know anything about Atchison and you followed my conversations, you'll know that Oscar Heavy Johnson was also born in Atchison, and also, what was his name? Andrew Skinner. Andrew Skinner, a pitcher, was born in Atchison. Now, Andrew Skinner, he's buried in Kansas City, Kansas, in Westline Cemetery, the same place as my grandparents. And I have family members who are also interned in that cemetery. It's the African American cemetery. And just in case you guys don't know, there were a lot of cemeteries that were segregated. I know in Kansas City, Kansas, there was one cemetery, which was Westline. And the reason they started that around 1920 is because in the other cemeteries, they wouldn't give them the good spot. So you get the spot, you know, down in the valley where if it rained a whole lot, you're going to be flooded and that kind of thing. People couldn't visit their loved ones. So Black people got tired of it and they started their own cemeteries. And there's at least 2 in Missouri. Highland is one of them. And you have people like Hurley McNair buried there. Quincy Gilmore is buried there. Charlie Parker is buried there. And if you listen to some of this stuff, you know, I talk about, and sometimes You know, people don't listen to the entire broadcast, but if you go back and listen to some of the broadcasts, some of the items I repeat, and I repeat them in different ways. And the reason I do that is to actually get you to absorb the information. Okay, then also, they're still talking about Kansas. There's a town called Muscata, Kansas, and it's probably about 44 miles from Troy. And you probably heard of a guy named Joe Tinker. Maybe you heard of Tinkers to Evers to Chance, and that famous double play combination for the Chicago Cubs. Well, actually, Joe Tinker was from Kansas as well, Muscata. And you know, in a lot of places around in Kansas here, you'll see a lot of names with American Indian related to them. So Muscata is one of them. I come from Wyandotte County, which was the Wyandotte Indians, and so you know there's a lot of things around here, the Shawnee and things like that. So you get a lot of Native American names coming through Kansas, and then also as you go into Oklahoma. So yeah, that was a Bert Wakefield. Now he played a pretty good team, the 1900 Columbia Giants. Now I will tell you this: the 1999 Columbia Giants were incredible. This is a team that I might one day include in my great team series, the 1899 Columbia Giants. And that was Home Run Johnson and Pat Patterson, who I like to talk about. He ended up being a police officer, died in the line of duty in Battle Creek, Michigan. And actually, I saw where he lived when I went to Battle Creek, Michigan. So, and Home Run Johnson, can't talk enough about him. He gets slighted all the time. Just a great, great player. Shouldn't be treated that harshly and that negatively. But hey, hopefully some of you guys in here would just roll up your sleeves and embrace this history and keep going. Also, Andrew Skinner. Andrew Skinner, you know, the guy who came from Atchison I just mentioned. I belong to the AME Church in Kansas City, Kansas, and years ago, one of his relatives, actually, he was the embalmer at one of the local funeral homes, Thatcher's, which is still there. Matter of fact, Thatcher's handled Bully Rogan's brother, Wilbur Rogan's funeral, and they've been there since 1900. But he was the embalmer there, and so I was able to go and talk to him about his cousin. So I picked up a lot about Andrew Skinner from his family member, and I went to church with him too. I'm trying to think what his name was. He used to sit in the back of the church in the back row, and a couple of people pointing him out to me that he was Andrew Skinner's cousin when I started doing baseball history. And this is 40 years ago. 40 years ago, he's gone on to glory. And so anyway, yeah, so that's just a little bit. And then Cannonball Miller, boy, I tell you what, I'm not going to spend too much time on him tonight, but that is another guy that deserves more attention. And every once, I know there's a guy that's working on a publication about Cannonball Miller. I don't know if he's made it official, so I'm not going to mention his name. But I've helped him from time to time, and we've been looking for information highly related to Cannonball Miller. Another great pitcher. How about another great nickname? All right. Let's go to October the 13th, 1906. So we're going to jump about 6 years. And this one is a Rube Waddell. Tossed a two-hitter and struck out 18 of the Philadelphia Giants in Camden, New Jersey, to help the Philadelphia Athletics to a 5-0 victory. All right. And he gave up 2 hits. And guess who he gave those 2 hits up to? Well, one of the guys I talk about all the time. Actually, I talk about both of these guys all the time. He gave up 2 hits, one of them to Pete Hill and the other one to Harry Buckner. I keep telling you, these guys were premier players. And at least Pete Hill has been able to get enshrined in Cooperstown. Harry Buckner, we got to keep working on him. We got to make the world aware of who Harry Buckner was. And this guy was a multi-talented pitcher who was just a great home run hitter. And these guys were hitting the home runs in the dead ball era. And when a guy could lead the National or American League with 10 home runs, these guys have been doing 10 home runs. They did it all the time. That was nothing to them. And they used to have more than 10. So Harry Buckner was one of those guys. And so, but yeah, so think about this. I think about all these players I knew, because I collected baseball cards. And so I'm looking at Rube Waddell. Never had any idea that he had pitched against the Philadelphia Giants. And see, this is the history that needs to be told, and that's what I'm trying to do. Yeah, Rube Waddell. And I think yesterday I talked about something. He was umpiring the game, and who was pitching that? He was umpiring that game, and the pitcher in that game was, well, maybe it's a couple of days ago, but he had umpired the game, and one of his other teammates pitched, and he's also a Hall of Famer as well. I don't see it here, but I talked about it recently. So, but anyway, 1906, Rube Waddell is pitching against the Philadelphia Giants. Now, I will mention this. One of the things I did early on in my career was I wanted to keep track of how many of these guys actually played against African American teams and players. So I began to take my Macmillan Encyclopedia, and when I would go to, say, like I go to Rube Waddell's bio in the book, and I would just pencil in, played against 1906 Philadelphia Giants. And you would be amazed how many people I was able to find. And there's probably not a single guy enshrined in Cooperstown who did not play against African American ball players. I doubt if there's one that's there. But that is not the history they tell you. So we're going to tell you here, okay? So, all right, let's go to the next one, okay? October 13, 1921. So now we're into the years of the Negro National League and the Kansas City Monarchs. They lose a game to the All Nationals at Lexington, Missouri by the score of 4-3. Ed Ryle and Sam Crawford pitched for the Monarchs. So look, not only did they play these National American League teams in Kansas City, they played them in smaller towns too. Lexington, Missouri, not a big town, but a lot of good ball players came from Lexington. When I think about Lexington, I'm going to think about J. Bird Ray. Octo J. Bird Ray came from Lexington. Bill Lindsay pitched for Ruth Foster. He came from Lexington. Who else I want to think about? Ashes Jackson, who played with the Kansas Giants and the Royal Americans. He was a good shortstop, infielder. He came through through Lexington. That was his hometown. Yeah, it was a lot of good ball players came through Lexington. They always had good ball players. And the team there that they sponsored through the years, going back to the turn of the century, was the Lexington Tigers. And many years ago, there was a barber there. His name was Bowdridge. And I was able to interview him. This is probably 1980. And he really keyed me in on all the guys who came through Lexington. And there were a great deal of players who came through there. And he just gave me the history. And at that time, he was probably about 85 years old. And this is 40 years ago. So just imagine how valuable that information is today. So, all right. So they're playing. And then, of course, Ed Ryle. Ed Ryle was about 6'7". And just imagine, people weren't that tall at the turn of the century. So this guy must have looked like a giant. But he pitched for Detroit, pitched for a few teams. And occasionally Kansas City, like in this case, they would bring him in to pitch. And he had pitched for them in 1921 when they played the Kansas City Blues of the American Association. So I guess he was still hanging around. Then Sam Crawford. Sam Crawford was one of the original Kansas City Monarchs managers. Sam was from Chicago, and after his baseball career was over, he went back to Chicago. And if you ever see these little newsstands that they have on the corner where people selling newspapers, that's what he did. So he had a kind of like a little media stand, and that's how he filled out the balance of his life. But Sam Crawford, yeah, he was a good one. I remember there was a game played somewhere in Kansas. Anyway, they were playing a white team, the Kansas City Monarchs, and they had a guy that just kept irritating Sam Crawford. So finally, Sam threw him a ball, and he hit it up in the air, and it was a pop out, and it was in foul territory. And I think it was Newt Joseph ran over to catch it. And Sam said, "Don't catch the ball." He said, "Let it drop. I want to strike this man out." And that's Sam Crawford. So, yeah, he was a real strict disciplinarian when he was managing the Monarchs. And, of course, some of the guys kind of rebelled against that. And they were happy to get Jose Mendez to come in. So they fired Crawford, and then they brought in Mendez to be his replacement. And some of the guys liked playing for Mendez quite a bit. I remember Chet Brewer used to tell me that Mendez was a real stickler for like details. And he was the kind of guy that says when you take a shower, make sure you drive between your toes and stuff like that, and make sure you don't get athlete's foot. But Sam Crawford was a different kind of character. But in 1934, they brought Sam Crawford back. And when the Kansas City Monarchs played in the Denver Post Tournament in 1934, Sam Crawford was their manager. So a lot of people don't know that. So he was back. He was back for a minute, but that was Sam Crawford before he retired and went to his newsstand in Chicago on State Street. And State Street now is Martin Luther King Boulevard, but at that time it was State Street, very famous street. And it's still a famous street, but it's named after Martin Luther King now. All right, let's go to October 13, 1926. And see, Pete Cockrell. I'm getting a lot of exhibition games. And when we get in October, man, I look for these. Pete Cockrell defeated Lefty Groves as Hilldale shut out Earl Mack's All-Stars 3-0 in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. At the fairgrounds, Grove tossed a 7-hitter as the crowd of 5,000 looked on. Now, that had to draw a lot of people. So Lefty Groves, man, Lefty Groves is a Hall of Famer. People say, well, we know about Lefty Groves. There's lots of pictures of him there with the Philadelphia A's. Connie Mack paid a big price to get him, Lefty. And of course, he's Lefty. But also, Pete Cockrell. People don't know about Pete Cockrell. They're not talking about Pete Cockrell, but he beats Lefty Groves. How about that? And his Hilldale teammates do as well. In 1926, 1925, Hilldale played in what they call the World Series for African-American teams, and they beat the Kansas City Monarchs. They have a good team in 1926, and guess what? Lefty Groves found that out. And then Earl Mack is Connie Mack's son, and so he used to put together these exhibition series at the end of the season and get a little more, get some of that change that was left on the table, and for the ball players in the wintertime. So, but hey, this is another one that was in the border of my book. So 1926, Lefty Groves playing Hilldale. Yeah, so this is the kind of stuff I think people should know, because almost any, I'll say it again, almost any ball player that was worth his salt played against African-American baseball players. Okay, let's go to one more. October 13, 1934, Charlie Beverly, I talk about him often, Mr. Charlie Beverly, struck out 15 batters as the Kansas City Monarchs defeated Dizzy Dean's All-Stars at Des Moines, Iowa. The game ended in a 9-0 win for the Monarchs, and was witnessed by more than 3,500 fans. And boy, I talk about Beverly quite a bit. Talk about Beverly to the point that hopefully you start to realize that this was a fantastic pitcher. And I always say that in the early 1930s, he was just as good as Satchel Paige. So that's Charlie Beverly, and out of Texas. And so here's what's interesting about that. I write about this game in my book, The Dizzy and Daffy Dean Barnstorming Tour, Race, Media, and America's National Pastime. I don't have a copy sitting in front of me of the cover, but you can look it up. And I write about this game. And what's interesting is Dizzy Dean came in the game, and they talked about, Dizzy, almost to how many pitches he threw. But when they talked about the 15 strikeouts, it was never mentioned. They mentioned that Charlie Beverly pitched, but they didn't want you to know in the newspaper that he actually showed up Dizzy Dean. So in the whole article about the game, there is no mention of the 15 strikeouts. Thank goodness there was a box score that was left. And if you look in the box score, then you see the 15 strikeouts. And I'm sure that included maybe Dizzy and his brother as well. And so that's Charlie Beverly, just another great pitcher that needs to be recognized, and we did it here tonight. And so through this exhibition series, man, you see Charlie Beverly's name, especially in the mid-30s, coming up often, just like you'll see Satchel Paige's name coming up often. But those weren't the only ones. And if you see, most of the people they're beating are in the Hall of Fame. And that got the crowd there. But guess what? These guys didn't lay down. They were fighting, trying to get these victories, all right? So that was it. And so anyway, those are just a few of the things I have for tonight. Don't want to keep you on here too long. I do want to mention one thing. I didn't talk about it on October 6th, so I'm going to go back to October 6th because I think it's important that I at least mention it before we get out of this month. And on October 6th, 2006, John Buck O'Neill passed away in Kansas City. And I have some really good memories of that day. I had just come back. Actually, let me go just a little bit further back. Um, Buck O'Neill had been in the hospital sick. Now, the last time that he made a public appearance, it was down at the Negro Leagues Museum, and I had just released a book on the Philadelphia Giants, believe it or not. And he came and he was there for that presentation, and then I left after my presentation. We took a picture, and Buck stayed around, and the Royals had a new general manager, so he's giving him a tour. And later on that evening, I heard that Buck had gotten sick, and they had to rush him to the hospital. And and he went into the hospital, never got out. And so that was in October, and I think, well, actually it was in September. So he ended up passing away probably about a month later, never got out of the hospital. And so they knew he was sick, and they didn't know if he was going to make his 96 years old. And so the local cable TV station told me to be on hold. So they said, if he passes away, we need you down at the studio, and we're gonna go live. And so Buck O'Neill ended up passing away. And just so happens that night I was at the UMKC, and we had just come from watching Jitney, and we were some friends. We were going down on the plaza to eat dinner after watching August Wilson's Jitney, and then I got the news on the telephone, so I had to leave the group that we were with. I went straight to it was the cable TV station, and over the next week, I was on TV every night for at least 2 hours, consoling Kansas City and talking about Buck O'Neill, having memories, just things that I knew. And I came on there every night with something different. And one thing I figured out immediately was I came on the first night. It's kind of like what I'm doing. You see I have a different jersey or something. Tonight I have a St. Louis jersey on. But I would come on there one night with a black shirt. Maybe the next night I have a red shirt. Maybe the next night a green shirt. So people would come and they say, "Hey, I saw you on TV last night." And because people were listening to this, it was really a tense time in Kansas City. Buck had a lot of friends, and that he had built up, especially since the Ken Burns documentary. And so a lot of people knew Buck, and they were following it. And so they would say, "Hey, I saw you on TV," and I would ask one simple question: "What color shirt was I wearing?" And they said, "Oh, well, you're wearing green." So I knew exactly what night I was on TV. And just for history's sake, I kept all of those broadcasts. And what's interesting now is they do tributes down at the Negro Leagues Museum on Buck O'Neill, and they'll bring in Ken Burns, and they'll bring in Posnowski, and they'll bring in people like that, but they never bring in Phil Dixon. Isn't that amazing? Yet I know more about Buck O'Neill than probably all of them, because I go back further. And then also, Buck O'Neill was a good friend of my family. When he would go to Detroit, he would stay with my relative. And he knew my family very well. And when I first met Buck, and I saw that his wife was an administrator, and I asked her, "Hey, do you know my family?" And I mentioned my cousin, and she said, "I know him very well." And just like that, man, they loved my cousin. He was of their age, and I was in like Flint. So I became their good friends. And to this day, I still go to the cemetery, and I decorate Buck's grave and his wife, Ora. And most people don't even talk about Ora anymore. They talk about Buck, but they never got a chance to know Ora O'Neill. And she was out of Memphis, Tennessee. Actually, a guy I'm probably going to talk about in a few days, named is Sam Brown. Sam Brown was the one who introduced them. Buck talks about their meeting after, if you ever see that little blurb he does somewhere, how he had a great day and he met his wife that same day. Well, the guy who introduced him was Sam Brown. And Sam Brown was the traveling secretary of the Memphis Red Sox, and I was able to interview him as well. So actually, I wrote a good bio on Sam. Maybe I'll talk about that. Maybe I'll give that bio before the month ends. So these are bios of some people that I interviewed. So guys, that's about it for me this evening. I'm not going to do a coming and going, talking about a ball player who came and maybe one who passed away on this day, because I just, the broadcasts just keep getting longer and longer and longer. But I'm trying to shorten them. I'm trying my best, guys, not to keep you too long, but trying to give you some information. And somebody, I guess they want to know more about Martin Diego. So I tell you what, at some point I'm going to talk about Diego. Diego, I recently met his granddaughter and his great granddaughter when I was in Rocky Mount, North Carolina. So I'm good friends with them now. And I wanted to do more. I wanted to get them to Kansas City. And I like talking about him. And when I think of the greatest all-around players that could hit and pitch, of course, when I came along, everybody said it was Babe Ruth, but believe me, Bullet Rogan and Martin Diego, and I think she said it's Diego, something like that, Diego. She had a different pronunciation. We're just killing the pronunciation of his name, but the family has a different way of pronouncing it. I've been trying to learn so I won't kill it like the rest of the country is. But when I think about the all-around greatest players, I got to think about Martin Diego and Wilbur Bullet Rogan. I think both of those players had an edge on Babe Ruth because they pitched much longer and they both hit for the long ball. And in the case of Bullet Rogan, this guy was a 10-second man, could run a 100-yard dash in less than 10 seconds. And we certainly know that Babe Ruth couldn't do that. So that's about all I have for today. And I just want to thank everybody who's been following me. I appreciate that so much. If you like what I'm doing, be sure to hit that bell and subscribe. Guys, I'm right at close to 200 subscribers. So if you can get me to 200 today, man, I'll be so proud of that. I'm probably about maybe 6 or 7 away. And then next month, we're going to go for 400. And we're going to try maybe by the end of the year to get to the 1,000 threshold, which means you could be monetized if you get enough views. So I'm going to do some interesting things to get the views up besides what I'm doing now. But in the meanwhile, you can help by just subscribing. So thank you guys. I'm out of here for tonight. And this is Phil Dixon. And this is This Day in African American Baseball History, October the 13th, 2025. But we started in 1900 and we went all the way to 1934. Thank you.